Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Late Debate.
Thanks for joining us on The Late Debate. I'm James MacPherson with Caleb Bond and Danica Giorgio, who spent the weekend in Melbourne celebrating your dad.
I did. Happy 70th birthday to my dad. We had a lovely weekend. You know, I really enjoy Melbourne because I enjoy the food, I enjoy the shopping.
And the machete attacks.
Well, you know, Caleb messages me on Friday night while I was in Melbourne, "Are you alive still?" That is the kind of treatment that I get on this panel.
What? I am caring for you, and I'm trying to confirm that you are still alive and have not been felled by a machete attack. Oh, this is the sort of treatment I get. Well, see if I care next time. When you get done over by a machete attack in Melbourne, I won't give a toss.
Well, it was more the premise that you just thought the worst.
Well, you know, it's Melbourne.
All right, well, on that note, let's get into the program. Here's what's coming up tonight. The South Australian Government has announced a royal commission into artificial intelligence. Tomorrow night is census night, and we all understand that's incredibly important. But is the penalty for failing to complete the forms, $364 a day, justified? And are we doing enough to protect ourselves from Chinese espionage? The UK Navy has just discovered some of its drone boats have been sending data to Beijing. We'll get into all of that shortly, but first, would you consider buying an EV for your next car? If you answer yes, well, you're in good company, because despite concerns over charging and range, the number of people now open to purchasing an EV has increased by 40%. Data released by car sales owner Car Group shows EVs are rapidly overtaking petrol-powered cars in desirability. The number of buyers considering diesel vehicles has plunged 34.9%, and the number of people planning on buying a petrol vehicle, well, that's dropped by almost 15%. I don't think it's too difficult to understand the growing appeal of EVs. 5 years ago, they seemed experimental. These days, they're very much mainstream. A few years ago, there were all sorts of questions over resale and performance. I think these days, those issues have largely been answered. 5 years ago, they were understandably concerned about where you'd charge your car. These days, lots of people are just doing it from home. And all of that is before we talk about the cost of maintenance. And we haven't even mentioned the price of fuel yet. So I've got to admit, my attitude towards EVs has shifted over the past 12 months. And Caleb, I could actually see myself driving a Tesla.
No, I could see you driving a Tesla too, actually, James. You seem like an EV sort of person. It'd suit you right down to the ground, I suspect, with your, you know, soy lattes and all of these things that you get up to, voting for
Tesla
the Greens.
Would burn you off at the lights much quicker than your petrol-powered Audi.
Well, and that may well be true, actually. I was watching a video the other day. I think it was a Tesla up against a souped-up Ford Falcon. On a drag strip, and the Tesla left it for dead. I don't disagree. They are very fast off the mark. They are quick vehicles. But let's talk fundamentally about what people, why they're looking towards electric vehicles. Now, they're not looking at Teslas by and large now. I mean, the number 2 car manufacturer of all cars in the country now is BYD, which is a Chinese manufacturer. And there are other Chinese companies that exist within the top 20. The reason people are looking at them is because they're cheap, like exceedingly cheap.
Yep.
Because they're made by China, and China, of course, subsidises this stuff. And then you have Chinese manufacturers, of which there are more than 40 that are selling cars in the country at the moment. You can't tell me they're all going to still exist tomorrow, right? They're basically dumping cheap Chinese electric vehicles on Australia to flood the market, which then means that they have to be sold for an incredibly cheap price because there's, of course, a glut of them, which means that all the other manufacturers who've existed... Now, mobs like Toyota and whatever will probably be OK. But you've got a number of other manufacturers that will end up being, you know, basically impossible to sell a car in Australia because the consumer will go for the cheaper Chinese model. And then once they've pushed all the other manufacturers out, well, it'll be China only. If you're lucky, you'll be able to buy a Toyota, you know, maybe something like a Mercedes or a Beamer that will still exist because people want to buy a luxury car. But the average consumer car market, I think, is going to be taken over by Chinese EVs. And I'm really wary of that because it's not just about EVs, it's about China. China wants to take over the whole operation. And we're just here going, yeah, come on, bring all your Chinese cars in here, sell them for next to nothing, and next thing we'll go, hang on, why can I only buy a Chinese vehicle?
But see, I said I'd buy a Tesla and you burned me for it.
Yeah, well, you know a lot of Teslas are made in China as well.
Oh, all right.
You didn't know that, James?
I didn't know that. I just assumed most of it was...
There you go.
Technology.
You've learned something new, haven't you? But I think, people will look at an EV if it's cheap or if there's a subsidy for it, right? But the average consumer, I think, would still like to buy a petrol-engined car or a diesel car. I'd look at a hybrid. I think hybrid makes a lot of sense. But when there are market forces that drive people to an EV, be it government subsidy or extremely cheap because China's dumping them on us, people will look at them. But I don't think if those two things existed, people would be looking directly at an EV.
Yeah, and the other issue is that they all look the same. And I still, at least you have the variety in a petrol or a diesel vehicle where you can have a different car. Whereas if everyone's driving a white Tesla around, there's certainly no variety.
Well, look,
was that a real female answer?
That's
can I just say?
To be fair, there are enough white Toyota Camrys on the road already. So,
yeah, but still, at least there's variety of vehicles. No, actually, I have a point to make. I'm not just giving you the female answer tonight. I disagree with you, James. I'm actually surprised that you're thinking about going down the EV route when Australia is not prepared for EV cars. This is the problem.
It depends where you live in Australia.
Okay, if you live in the city,
if you live in
no
North
problems.
Queensland,
if you're travelling
if you live in
5 to 10 k's a day, you've got absolutely no issues whatsoever. But if you are travelling outside of the city for work, if you're living in regional Australia, forget it. There is absolutely no point in getting an EV. If you like weekend trips, if you like to go away for a drive over the weekend,
sure,
wouldn't bother unless you absolutely love planning. You like to put provisions in place. You know where you need to stop if you need to charge up an EV. You have contingency plans. Who the heck has that sort of time to think ahead?
Danica. But, yeah, let me interrupt though. You're not doing long trips and you live in Sydney, so...
Yeah.
That's why I would have an EV. Why wouldn't you get one?
Because they're also very expensive as well to start with. You're looking at around $80,000 for a Tesla when you can just buy a normal vehicle for half of that price that is going to last you forever. I think Hyundais are very, very strong. Nissans are very, very good cars. Why on earth would you want to trade that in?
Have you filled your car with petrol recently?
Yeah, I have.
What did it cost you to fill it up?
Look, to be fair, I barely use my car.
Our car's getting close to $200 to fill it up these days.
Yeah, but you travel longer distances than what I do, to be honest. So I think that's probably why it would be very more expensive for you. And my car, and I think you've got a very fancy car, if I may just say that. You've got quite a nice vehicle. I'm not going to tell viewers what it is, but the car I see you drive is quite nice.
I don't think a Bentley is really that nice.
I don't have a fancy schmancy James MacPherson vehicle, so I don't have to...
You've got to talk to the bosses about that.
I know, I need to sort that out. But also the other thing is, it's unreliable at best of times. Easter long weekend, lengthy delays at the charging stations. You could take a couple of hours to more than a day to fill up to charge your vehicle, depending on the type of battery that it's got.
My friends have got EVs.
Type of charger it's got. I know that there are fast chargers,
they charge it at home overnight.
But not everybody has access, James, to that level of infrastructure. So it's all right for some people who can do it in their apartment complex or wherever, but not everywhere in Sydney or inner city Melbourne has that charger available.
Yeah, I agree with you, but if I can do it, that's what I would do.
What an absolute piss fart around, if I could say. Who has time for all of this when you just want to go charge up at the petrol station?
You sleep while it's charging.
And James, for me, there's a petrol station. I'm going to swing in and I'm going to swing right out.
He's joined the environmental revolution. James MacPherson, greenie, soy cappuccino drinker, EV driver, teal voter.
No, I'm saying they are cheaper in maintenance, they're cheaper in fuel, they're quicker to drive, and you know what? Let's be honest, it is the future now. So I reckon late adapter, but I'm on board. Yeah,
you know what? I'm not opposed to the concept of them, and I do like that they go exceedingly fast, but it's just impractical for a lot of people. Like, it might work for you, but, I've got a flat... Now, I have a parking space, but it's in an old building. There's no power in it. Like, yeah. I can't charge the thing, right? So I'll stick with what I do need a new car, because the thing I'm driving at the moment is a bit of a lemon. But...
with EVs, I was at a Porsche dealership.
My exact
you were buying a Porsche, were you, James?
I just wanted a weekend vehicle, and so I'm there looking at Porsches, and the dealer told, and I was a bit like, why would you get an electric Porsche, right? And the dealer said to me that he has never been scared driving a motor vehicle than when he first test drove the latest electric Porsche. He said it was so quick off the mark, he literally scared himself.
See, I understand all this, but what about the noise that you get out of a car like a Porsche or a Jaguar or something? That's what I would want.
Oh, yeah, but that's just
Did you know this? My mate, right, so he's got a Tesla. He was visiting me in Sydney. He's got the car parked at his kid's place in Brisbane. And you can, sorry, this is so juvenile, but you can push a button and the car makes farting noises.
What?
Yeah, it literally does. So it's something they've put in Teslas, I guess, to make people, I don't know, turn around or laugh when they're walking down the footpath.
So
now
we're now we're into buttons and noises. But whatever happened to just driving a vehicle?
We've come to why James wants an electric vehicle, because his mate has a Tesla that farts, and so he's thought, well, I want one of them. While you're talking about all this technology that makes cars fart and all this sort of business, artificial intelligence, AI, or as Boris Johnson calls it, AI. In South Australia, they've now decided they're going to have a royal commission. Now, I don't know anywhere else in the world that has done this. There may be jurisdictions, but I'm going to suggest that this is a world-leading move by Peter Malinauskas, the Premier of South Australia. He's been on a fact-finding mission to the United States about AI technology. He's come back and announced today that they'll be the first place in the country to hold a royal commission.
It is absolutely clear that the use of artificial intelligence is an exciting opportunity to advance the cause of humanity. But it is also true that, unchecked, artificial intelligence does represent a material risk to the way our society operates and a risk to the future of work if not thought through carefully.
I think this is a sensible move. Look, to be fair, I think we should have been looking into regulation and doing all of this stuff 3 years ago, when you had an open letter put out by people like Elon Musk and Steve Wozniak and lots of other people Sam Altman, I mean, the boss of ChatGPT, OpenAI, who put out an open letter saying, you know, we need basically a moratorium on AI development now because this thing is moving so fast and we don't know where it's going and what it could do for humanity. But in lieu of all of that, we are starting to have a genuine discussion now about regulation. And I think a royal commission, I prefer it was done at a federal level, but anything that can be done to look genuinely into this stuff, I think is a good move. Yeah, there's so many issues to consider. The ethics of AI on a multitude of fronts is a really important discussion that should be had now rather than later. Then you've got what sort of training we need to have for our nation, how it's going to affect the workforce. We haven't even talked about education and what it means for our kids at school or our university students. I note now for HSC, you're not allowed to take assignment work home because they're worried kids will use AI to do their assignments at home. And then you've got how it can help to improve productivity. So I don't know, Danica, why you would not have a royal commission into the biggest change in our economy since the Industrial Revolution.
Because I don't think that AI is the priority right now, and I don't think that the South Australian Premier should be blowing $3 million of taxpayers' money to investigate it when there are so many other issues at hand. We're still in a cost of living crisis. Immigration is still running hot. There is a housing crisis. We can't get people into homes. There is a supply issue right now. Energy is a big issue. Energy is a massive issue in South Australia.
As it is to AI.
But okay, if you asked, I'd be very curious, you go up to somebody in the street, right, South Australia, what are your top 3 issues that you're facing right now? Do you think that any of them realistically are going to be listing AI
so we should forget,
top 3?
So we should forget about all the other issues?
Well, hang on a second. We didn't even have a royal commission into the COVID pandemic. We can't even have that. And we've got to have a royal commission into
We should have one.
AI.
I agree.
Well, but on the list and scale of priorities, do you really think that AI is right up there? No, I don't.
I do think it is. I think
there are other issues at hand right now where you could be putting your $3 million worth elsewhere right now.
And I'm not saying, $3 million is nothing.
I'm not saying you can't have an inquiry into AI.
Well, that's what they're having.
But I wouldn't put it as a priority right now. I think in the future,
So we'll wait until AI has, moved so far ahead that it's basically unregulatable. And they've built all of these data centres and all this stuff all over the country.
Well,
and at that point, we'll say, OK, let's have a chat about how we do it.
But then what happens when you get the findings, and then we've suddenly got to spend more money because things. We've got to do more. We've got to change policies. We've got to do this and do that. But it's not the priority right now, and that's what I'm saying. I do not think you should be wasting time on an AI Royal Commission when there are so many other pressing issues for Aussies
Danica,
right now.
Is AI is increasing so rapidly that if they don't get a handle on it now, they'll never be able to catch up in terms of regulation, in terms of its usage, in terms of the ethics. It's already too late, I think, for an inquiry into this. Like you said, Caleb, this should have been done a few years ago. And it should have been done by a Prime Minister. Thank God the South Australian Premier's had the foresight.
Well, Anthony Albanese had to be dragged kicking and screaming into a Bondi Royal Commission. He would never hold an inquiry. The point I'm trying to make is that I'm all for Royal Commissions, but I'm for them at the right time and when they are the right thing to do. And I would put COVID Royal Commission way ahead of AI.
Okay,
so
South Australia can't. If they did a Royal Commission into COVID in South Australia, it's only going to deal with South Australia. It's not going to be of any use to the rest of the country.
No, it needs to be a national COVID.
Right? I absolutely agree with you. At what point do you think we should have an AI Royal Commission? When would be the right time?
I just think maybe in 2 years' time.
In 2 years' time, when AI is exponentially bigger than it is now, that's when we'll have the Royal Commission.
Well, I just think that honestly, I maintain that it's not up there in the top 3 issues for everyday Australians right now.
So
I honestly would love to go and
chat
to people on the streets and say, what are your top 3 issues?
Yeah, but
where do you want your government to focus their priorities and their policies right now? And I can almost guarantee no one's going to say, artificial intelligence is where my issue is.
People on the street are not sitting around their kitchen table thinking about what will Australia look like 10, 20 years from now.
No, and people are using AI. People are using AI, and that's the reality.
They're not thinking about consequences. They're not thinking about future regulation, future needs for the country. But our politicians should be thinking about these things. And it's good that they are.
Well, they should be thinking about cost of living, housing, immigration and the rest of it that comes with it.
I don't disagree on that.
That's what I think as well. Now, you can have your say on all these things, really. Tomorrow night, a very, very big night. It is census night. It's that fun time where we all have to answer questions about what our household looks like. It's going to be asking you a myriad of questions about your salary, your profession, the type of home you live in, the rent that you pay. All those sorts of fun questions so that we can get a snapshot of what Australia looks like. And I personally think it's actually very important that we do get a snapshot of what Australia looks like. Now, more than 1.2 million households have actually already completed your census. So if you are going to do it now or tomorrow morning, for example, you have to write it, we'll fill it out as if you were completing it on the night of the actual census. Now, beware, if you do not complete it, you will cop a fine of $364 per day for an incomplete census. So basically, the ABS will contact you and ask you why it hasn't been done, tell you to do it. If you still don't do it, a formal direction will be ordered. If you refuse that order, then the fine will be issued. And look, I think it's fair enough. There's been a lot of debate online saying $364 is an absolute rort. No, it's not a rort. We need to know where we're at in this country. We need to be able to combine all of the statistics to see what our the average household looks like, what our migrational statistics look like. I'm all for the fines. Do your census. I actually did mine the other night. Have you two completed yours?
Not yet.
Yeah, you have.
Done ours.
A couple of things that I thought of when I did mine, and I thought, wow, how Australia has changed, how things have changed. Firstly, there's a sexual orientation question. That's the first time that they're putting the sexual orientation in there. There is a what was your sex recorded at birth question, which is perplexing at best to ask it in such a way as to not offend. Now. What was your sex recorded at birth?
But do they not also asking about transgender status?
They do. They ask about that.
Which is why they've got to make the distinction, because then you wouldn't have an idea of what was real and what wasn't.
You're a man or a woman, right?
Yeah, I know, but is it not legitimate for the census to ask questions about people who are or aren't transgender? Because we keep, it's an issue, big issue.
Sure.
And we get these numbers thrown around about, maybe it's this % or that %.
Yeah.
This is the best opportunity we have to get a picture of what Australia looks like.
And the other two issues I had...
Sorry, just before we move on to the other two issues, the problem with this is they're normalising radical gender ideology by asking what was your sex at birth.
Correct.
As if your sex could be anything other than what it was at birth. And then they ask, do you identify as male, female, non-binary? What is we all know what non-binary is meant, but But non-binary is not actually... You can't be non-binary.
Well, you can't identify as non-binary.
Well, non-binary is not actually a thing. You're either male or female.
Well, you can. I mean, you could identify as a lamppost if you wanted
And that's my point. So these questions are silly to have in a government document, and they're normalising this by putting it in the census.
I don't think they are, because there is money, government money, being spent on these issues. And so I think it's legitimate for us as a public to be able to look at the reality of what people are identifying as and what they say they are, etc., because it gives us a metric by which to judge all of this stuff.
And that's why lobby groups wanted these questions in the census, because they will argue that whatever the numbers are, demand funding and policy and programs, and so we'll end up normalising what I don't think we should be normalising.
But it already exists, though.
I know it exists, but now the government are looking for reasons to...
And now it's in writing.
...further promote it within the culture.
It's now in writing, and now we can actually talk about it.
You mentioned it asked about your sexuality. Maybe a minor point, but I just thought it was strange it asked you if you're straight rather than if you're heterosexual.
Yeah, look, but does it even need to be in there? Does it need to be in
Again, I think it's a legitimate statistic.
Do you think it's a legitimate...
Yeah, I think it's a
picture.
picture.
It asks you bisexual.
It asks
what
you...
What government policy applies to bisexuality?
But, OK, so why should we not have an accurate picture of what the country looks like? I think they're pertinent questions that relate to individuals.
So
I mean,
why is bisexuality pertinent to the Australian government's planning for the country?
Well, who knows? It may be at some point.
But also, how do you know if you are? One day you might be straight, the next day you're like, I'm bi, and then, you know... How do you, you know...
Well, do you wake up in the morning and change your sexuality?
No,
I don't think most people...
Well, in New South Wales, you can change it every 12 months if you wish.
No, well, you can change your sex, not your sexuality. You don't have to...
That's the problem.
You don't have to log your sexuality with the government. It's not on a register.
The census is taken every 5 years.
Sure.
Yes.
Well, within 5 years in New South Wales, I could have changed my gender 5 times.
Well, maybe so.
By the next census.
But it's a capture of the country on that night. I don't see why it's a bad thing that we would collect as much information as possible about the people who live in the country.
The other issue that I had was with the religion question. So with the religion, the very first box that comes up is non-religious. Now, I know that Christianity wasn't listed on there, but we were talking about this earlier and you said that Christianity has never been listed. But here's where it actually stumped me, and I'm wondering whether it will stump others. But because there wasn't other options, I found myself ticking that non-religious box, even though I have my own beliefs about things, but then I wasn't sure where I fitted into any of the categories that were available.
In the box at the bottom where it says other.
Yeah, I suppose so, but then why wouldn't you just list other things?
Well, because then you would be there forever. Now, if you go and look at the 2021 numbers, where the ABS has done the report on what they got back, they have added up all the Christian denominations and said that the number one religion in the country is Christianity, right? But it gives them because Christianity is such a large religion and is the most popular religion in the country, it then gives them a better idea of what you actually are by breaking it down into the denominations. But the literature all has Christianity first, non-religion number 2, from memory, I think it's Islam 3 and then Hinduism.
Yeah.
But then they go into, they've broken it down, all the people who've sort of given things other than a normal religion, and it tells you how many people wrote in the other box atheist, how many people wrote in, duotheism, people who wrote in spiritual, people who wrote in, Yoda or whatever. Like, it's all listed there, right? Mm-hmm. So the place you put your other religion is other.
And the other interesting point I'll make is, we talk about the changing face of Australia, the question about what is your heritage or what's your cultural background. And there was none for Italy. Obviously, I had to put Italian. And not that I thought, oh, that's disappointing that there's not Italy already listed as a checkbox, so I just had to put it under the other. But I thought, doesn't that tell you how different our culture looks like? Once upon a time, we relied on a lot of European migrants from Italy and Greece to come to this country. And now, in the boxes that you can check, it's like India, where else? India was one of the, China, they were the two that really stand out. It's just fascinating, the changing face of this country, that the European nations aren't specifically listed.
Well, just while we're talking about the census, the other interesting thing, you mentioned the no religion was the first box you could tick when it came to spirituality. The census had that that was the last box in 2016. Then they moved it to the top in 2021. And there was a great article in The Australian at the weekend talking about how even the ABS now admit that their statistics aren't exactly reliable on how many people are irreligious as compared to Christian, because they moved the question around, and that affects the way people answer things. So, and they moved it around under pressure from atheists who hoped that that would cause more people to tick non-religious. So there's a lot of political plays that go into the census.
Always.
It's not just an accurate measure of the country. It's very much mobilised by activists of all kinds. If the census tells us something about what the country is supposed to look like, I suppose our universities tell us something about what the country's training for. And we were curious to see that Brighton University in the UK is offering a brand new course on politics, sexuality and gender. The course is advertised like this. This cutting-edge degree introduces you to historical and contemporary struggles around sexuality and gender, preparing you to shape the sexual politics of the future. Training in research skills prepares you for a range of meaningful careers in equality, diversity and inclusion, the public sector and the third sector. If you dig deep into this course, you'll find that you are able to examine feminist, queer and trans political movements, as well as a historical and modern overview of battles on sexuality and gender. And if you enrol in this course, you'll be able to do practical placement with local feminist and LGBTQI groups, which will give students hands-on experience in the growing DEI industry. The other thing that it will give you is a £50,000 student debt and no prospect of meaningful employment. This is not a private institution. If it was a private institution with a niche course, who cares? But this is a publicly funded university offering a course that, I mean, normally when you go to university, you are educated. This is very much indoctrination. You're not learning a skill. You're learning a particular worldview that is, I would argue, not particularly needed in the UK right now. Of all the things they need young people to be trained for, to be diversity, equity and inclusion officers, particularly as it relates to queer and gender diverse minority groups, is probably not a priority, but maybe they put the question in the census, Caleb, and as a result of that census question, now they're directing policy and training options.
Well, I think they're feathering their own nest is what they're doing. I mean, it's the long march through the institutions seemingly going very well. You know, you start with, oh, well, we've got to fight against the elites at the universities, you know, all these people who are too concerned about the classics and they're concerned about history and they're concerned about art and all that. Oh, no, we couldn't possibly. These stuffy, hoity-toity people. So we have to sort of democratise higher education, and we'll do that as they have done in this country by, you know, uncapping enrolments and basically saying, well, everyone should have the opportunity to go to university. Uni's a place for everybody. You know, the government starts saying we want everyone to go to university. We want them to further their education. The unis love that because they then make a lot of money out of it. The people who once decried the elite have now become the elite, the left that are running these universities that they used to rail against. And having done so, they've decided, well, seeing as we are now the elite, we may as well push some of our barrows upon these people. And so they've come up with this sort of garbage. I mean, the fact that we fund it, and I say we, obviously we're in Australia, we're not funding the UK, but we have the same sort of rubbish going on here. The fact that taxpayers contribute to all of this stuff is just crap. If a university is not doing what it does for the betterment of the society and the betterment of the country, they ought to have the funding taken away, because this is not doing a single thing to help anyone. It's just pushing ideology.
Well, way to keep yourself unemployed. You're never ever going to get a job if you ever do a degree of this nature.
And then the taxpayer is to pay them the dole.
But, you know, I was thinking back to some of the nonsense that I had to do at university as part of my journalism course, and they were those sorts of fill-in subjects that you have to do throughout the semester to get your gradings, and we did one called Culture to Cultures. So already, this is going down a slippery slope when it's called Culture to Cultures. But in it, we learnt about stereotypes, Indigenous values. What else? We learnt about prejudices. So it's a very woke university. This is what we want you to say and have a view on life.
What did you learn, Danica?
Well, I mean, it was so long ago, I don't think I learnt anything, to be honest, from that. I just wanted to get my journalism degree and get a job and bugger off, though I loved uni, but I just think that...
Well, I remember my son was the same. He is studying physiotherapy, and he came home and said, Dad, started my physiotherapy course, and my first module is Indigenous Studies.
Oh,
he said, I'm trying to work out what it's got to do with physiotherapy. I said, son, just suck it up.
But you know what it's actually creating?
Move on.
It's creating another generation of activists, because I was looking at the modules for this course in the UK. So number 1 is queer writing.
Yes.
Number 2 is radical political economy and anarchist politics. Gee, that's going to get you far, but here's the good one. Colonialism, capitalism and the climate crisis. So we're equipping this generation with a hell of a lot of good skills that they're going to then take into the workforce.
The stupid thing about this course in the UK, it'd probably qualify you to be commissioner of the police force in the UK.
Well, that's so true.
The way the coppers go.
That's absolutely true. But it also just exposes the DEI going on at universities at the moment. I mean, you look at the saga going on with the former Cambridge professor. You've got Jason Arday. Gee, that's an absolute disaster, isn't it? And it's still going, because obviously he has just resigned from Cambridge University. How he ever made the entry requirements there, but he's now cancelled his book tour. Would you believe? I mean, who would have thought? Gosh knows. I would like to read what that book says. I am so curious to know what his book says. And so we thought we would bring back this pearl of a line from him.
I would take a thread and a needle and I'd interweave love into our society. That's what I would do. I think the absence of love in our society is absolutely palpable. And so for me, the thing that I would do if I could change the world, I would have the world and I'd have it spinning on this axis of love. That's what I'd have, because we've lost, as a society, in my humble opinion, I think we've lost our way.
Yeah, look, it's not working. It's really not working. I said this the other night. Don't you think he looks like Milli Vanilli? I can't. Every time I see him, he's Milli Vanilli.
Well, Milli Vanilli were well known for plagiarism too, weren't they? Because they never actually sang any of their songs.
Blame it on the rain. Blame it on the rain, Caleb.
Milli Vanilli had the good sense not to actually make any noises from their mouth.
That's right.
Take a leaf out of there.
But, I mean, if that bloke can get a job in universities in the UK, then it kind of explains why they have these sort of queer studies courses and things, doesn't it? Let's move on from the strange goings-on at universities in the United Kingdom to fruit in Australia, shall we? I think there might have been a couple of things on the Prime Minister's mind of late.
On old dogs and children and watermelon wine.
I think he may be needing to have a few sips of that watermelon wine to get over the things that have been going on today. Of course, there was a piece in The Australian from the former Japanese ambassador saying that Japan had taken note of comments that the Prime Minister had made in a podcast, Bush Deep, I mean, as if he didn't know what was coming there, with Bush Barbie, Nikki Osborne. Of course, these comments are the ones I'm talking about.
The Japanese Prime Minister brought a melon.
Did she smuggle it?
I don't know.
Oh, I'm expecting...
Got a couple of melons.
She brought 2.
She brought 2, as you do.
She just came in looking like Pamela Anderson.
She brought 2.
Yes, really.
And they're beautiful.
Oh.
And then we had Tanya Plibersek this morning saying, there's no sexual connotations, he wasn't talking about her knockers, etc, etc. Come on, we know what was going on there. But so it's now escalated from the letter that was written in the Oz by the former ambassador to now the Japanese government, we find out tonight in The Australian, has formally raised this with the government. I mean, what I don't get is why politicians struggle to just admit when they get things wrong. If the Prime Minister simply said, you know what, I made ill-advised comments, I shouldn't have done it, I'm really sorry. Why are we still here talking about this? He could have killed this story dead months ago, and yet, I don't know, no, he wasn't referencing her breasts. I mean, just say, yes, it was a crude comment, I'm really sorry I made it, I want to repair the relationship with Japan, sorry.
The Japanese raised this with the Australian government a few days or weeks ago. They've been a very good friend and very gracious, sort of just mentioning that their main concern was that she had not smuggled these melons into Australia. They were locally sourced. But they've been all class as opposed to our Prime Minister, who's been anything but. Tanya Plibersek tried the whole ABC thing where she basically blamed the public for not sort of understanding that it was a joke, but it wasn't a sexual joke. I think we all knew exactly what Anthony Albanese was referring to, and certainly the host of the podcast didn't shy away from it. And then Catherine King today said, well, you know, the podcaster made some comments, but didn't say anything about Albanese's comments, which were the subject of the complaint. As for Anthony Albanese himself, he said that, you know, no innuendo was implied at all. How could you have watched that? I mean, he was talking about shagging Kylie Minogue. He was talking about having sex with his wife after a Rabbitohs win. And then he's talking about melons with the appropriate hand gestures and Pamela Anderson. And he expects us to believe it wasn't a sexual innuendo, just like we're expected to believe he didn't fall off the stage.
Yeah.
That, you know, the $275 power price was not a rock-solid gold promise, and on the list goes. This is just another Anthony Albanese gaslighting the Australian public.
But also the gaslighting from Tanya Plibersek this morning when she said, well, you just watch the video footage for yourself. Well, we have seen the video footage for you. Does she think we all came down in the last shower and we don't know that the innuendo behind what Anthony Albanese was implying? But also it just, again, exposes the double standards of Labor. If this was anybody else, women like Tanya Plibersek would have gone into bat. They would have absolutely gone nuts if it was a Liberal politician that had said something like this. So I agree. What the best course of action was, I'm sorry, it was very ill-advised on my end. I apologise and move on. And yet now the Japanese are offended because the embassy's involved.
Exactly. We're going to go to a break. When we come back, we'll look at what's making headlines tomorrow, including the Victorian election becomes all about rubbish bins. That's next. Let's take a look at what's making headlines tomorrow. And Caleb, questions in the Australian tomorrow about how our national defence is being handled.
Indeed, long-range missiles on the Yonder is the headline, exclusive here from Ben Packham. The Albanese government is claiming credit for buying air-to-air missiles that are yet to enter service and aren't due to be delivered to Australia for years, sparking criticism. It is engaged in quote-unquote performative procurement to shore up its defence credentials. Defence Minister Richard Marles last week announced a $736 million acquisition of AIM-260 Joint Advanced Tactical Missiles, declaring they would soon, quote-unquote, be carried by Australian fighter jets. But the AIM-260 is yet to achieve initial operating capability, and military news sites say Australia won't get them until 2033.
Oh. Terrific.
Fantastic.
Great. Really
soon,
great.
Very soon.
Very soon.
It's only what's that? 6 years away. Come on, 7 years.
And the
away.
problem, as is raised in the article, is that Xi Jinping has told the Chinese military to be ready for conflict with Taiwan 2027, which is next year.
Yeah.
So by the time we get our missiles, whatever conflict is planned for our part of the world will be all over, bar the shouting.
Well, exactly. And I noticed that there's a great Greg Sheridan opinion piece. He says Defence Minister Richard Marles is good at defence diplomacy. He's terrible at everything else. I think that sums it up very well.
Indeed. Another story on the front of the Oz tomorrow. Crushed carers lose boy. A 7-year-old boy with high needs has been taken away from the diligent, loving and adept foster carers he called mum and dad after a court found the Caucasian Australian couple could not deliver the, quote, cultural immersion required for the boy's South Sudanese ethnic heritage. The case has prompted criticism of both the West Australian Government and the state's Department of Communities, with the foster parents, the state opposition and the magistrate who made the order all finding fault with the way the boy's situation had been managed. It also sparked debate over the laws that drove the decision, while the foster parents, who have looked after more than 20 mostly high-needs children, have vowed to never take another child into their home. Where do you begin? And it's not the first case I'm aware of like this. I have spoken to people who've been in this kind of situation before, but have been too afraid to speak publicly because they're concerned that it will hurt their ability to ever look after another child again. All around this question of, well, the child is of another ethnicity or heritage, and therefore because you're white or some other mob that is different from this kid, that you apparently can't care for them properly. I mean, surely the number one concern is to get a kid, particularly one with high needs, into a loving home where they are safe and they are looked after. Who cares whether the parents are black, white or brindle? If they're looking after that kid and that kid is safe, that should be the only concern.
And there was no doubt about any of those factors in the foster care situation. By all accounts, they were exemplary people. The child was much loved. He was calling the foster parents mum and dad. He had foster siblings that he loved. And there were significant questions about the grandmother who he's gone to live with as to her ability to care for him because particularly of his special needs. And the only criticism was, because he's Sudanese and they're not, that they would not be able to provide for his cultural heritage needs. So he's been moved. Imagine the trauma for the kid.
Well, and also imagine the trauma for the foster parents as well. Can you imagine the heartache that they're feeling right now?
Yeah.
That their child has been ripped away from them because of a stupid decision.
Yep. All right, stupid decisions plenty in the state of Victoria. The Liberals are trying to rectify them, starting with rubbish bins. The front page says bin warfare. Opposition leader Jess Wilson has fired her latest election salvo, vowing weekly rubbish collection for all Victorians. Does that not seem to you like a funny election topic? But
it is a bit odd.
Victoria is so broken, the bins are only being collected in most suburbs fortnightly. Jess Wilson says that she's got a plan in which she promises to scrap fortnightly rubbish collection. She guarantees ratepayers will not be slugged any extra to fund the increased services. I would have thought having your rubbish picked up and taken to the dump once a week would have been the minimum service, not fortnightly. Ironically, I think in many Victorian suburbs your food scraps are picked up every week, but your general waste, which stinks to high hell, is not.
Well, but see, and this is fun, because the food scraps are the bits that would, often decompose and stink and whatever. But if you've got kids, like babies, nappies and things, like where are you going to put them? Oh, I'll just leave them there for a fortnight. If you've got pets and, you've got to pick up the dog's droppings, it's just ridiculous. Come on.
The other story on the front page of tomorrow's Herald Sun, absolute gutful of potholes. A monster pothole that wrecked more than 30 cars and left dozens stranded on the side of a busy highway has drawn the ire of Victorians, with a local MP saying he's had an absolute gutful of the state government's inaction. The crater-sized pothole caused carnage for city-bound drivers heading along the Princess Highway just outside Bunyip. And, of course, you remember back in November near Nanagoon, which is one of my favourite place names to say. A pothole claimed 20 vehicles. That was back in November. So
wasn't it a Victorian MP who said last week that
people like the potholes?
People like potholes.
It makes the streets quiet.
Maybe, right. Yeah, maybe go on this busy highway and see how she feels.
It really does.
Well, then, do you remember Jess Wilson went and did a social media thing where she's filling in the potholes, and someone complained that she's breaking the law by doing roadworks without authorisation.
But it really tells you about the state of Victoria, doesn't it? When two of the biggest stories going around are that you don't get your bins emptied often enough, and the opposition wants to fix that, and that potholes are bringing more than 30 cars a cropper. I mean, that's the state of the place.
Another day in Victoria, as we say every night on this program.
Nanagoon is good, though. That's, do you want a bottle of wine? Nanagoon.
What?
Very good. Move on, Danica. The Daily Telegraph.
Let's say, what are you on about?
Don't you get it?
No. Should I get it?
I'll explain it to you later.
OK, never mind. Let's go look at the Daily Telegraph. It's a parking disgrace special investigation. Sydney's long-suffering commuters are being forced to leave home before the sun is up just to fight for a car park spot by 7:30am, with more than half of the city's rail car parks full before the working day has even begun. 16 out of 26 metro and train stations with a dedicated park and ride car park were full by 9am last Thursday, while 8 had less than 50% 50% vacancy. In Sydney, only Emu Plains and Warwick Farm boasted parking availability of more than 50% by 9 a.m. What an absolute pain. Seriously, you've got no choice but to commute, but you can't get your car to the train station, so then you have to figure out a bus route to then get to the train station. It just adds so much more time onto your day. Look, the infrastructure, again, we don't have the infrastructure to cater for a booming population, and this is the problem across the country and not just in New South Wales.
Well, indeed. Has either of you ever been to Emu Plains?
I think I drove through Emu Plains on my way to somewhere else, but I'm not sure why you... What is that Emu Plains that you would drive
Well,
through?
it's next to Penrith, so, I mean, you wouldn't specifically go there unless you were going there for a reason. I went out there recently for the very first time.
I wonder how Tesla would go out there.
It's not that. Look,
James, you want to give it a crack?
Someone's got a Tesla they want to lend me, sure, I'll drive it to Emu
I mean,
Plains.
to be fair, it's not that far out of Sydney, but it does kind of tell you if it's the extremities of suburban Sydney, Warwick Farm, Emu Plains are the only places where you can get a car park, then there's a lot of Sydney that is struggling in amongst all of that. On the front of the Cairns Post tomorrow, accused smuggler had 10 people in his hotel room. Sounds like a hell of a party, doesn't it? Fishtail quizzed. A Sydney painter who spent years living illegally in Australia has been denied bail after 10 undocumented boat arrivals were discovered crammed into his remote hotel room.
Wow.
Well, there's a bit going on there, isn't there?
Bunk up.
There you go. All right, we're going to go to a break. When we come back, New South Wales police embarrassed when they mistook a sex doll for a murder victim. That's next. Well, a Brazilian footballer is our...
Dunk of the day.
Yes, this star Brazilian footballer kicked a goal and got so excited he ran towards the crowd, leaped over the hoarding and disappeared down a tunnel. Now, that tunnel was uncovered because it leads down to the opposition's dressing room. He hurt his ankle, had to come off at half-time, but to make it worse, there was an offside call, so the goal he was celebrating was not even a goal. But here's why he's a real dope. Back in 2014, a Cameroon footballer did exactly the same thing at exactly the same stadium. And here we are 13 years later, 12 years later, same mistake.
Can you imagine what it must feel like when you jump over and you're expecting the floor to be there and you instead just keep going down?
I've reached hell. I've reached the worst point of my life.
Yeah, I can't imagine it would be terribly fun.
No.
And I don't think it would have been terribly fun to be a select number of New South Wales coppers over the weekend either. You know, we wouldn't normally do it, but I reckon I feel a second one coming on.
Dunk of the day.
Yes, if you haven't been following this story, some blokes yesterday found a bag. And I thought, oh, geez, very heavy, this bag. They reported it to the coppers. And then the coppers said they found a body inside. They found a woman, dead woman, apparently decomposing, the police said, inside of this bag. And so they were frantically trying to work out who it was and what led to these circumstances, until they sort of very sheepishly had to confirm this afternoon that wasn't a woman, it was actually a doll.
Oh.
A lifelike doll.
Oh.
How do you just sort of miss that it wasn't an actual person and that it was in fact... I mean, they said it was decomposing. They were convinced this was a real person.
Well, maybe it just shows how good technology and sex dolls have come over the years,
Extraordinarily so,
I mean, that now you can't tell the difference between whether they're real life or not, and maybe that's a big problem.
Now, no, you can't tell the difference between a sex doll and a dead person.
Well, no, but, you know, it's true that they make them so lifelike now.
Oh, well, there'll be more to come on this story.
Yeah, OK. Well, you know, we normally don't do this, but we're going for a trifecta tonight.
Dunk of the day.
Yes, a biological man who identifies as a woman who fled Donald Trump's America because they didn't like Donald Trump, then went to the Netherlands, ended up in a European asylum centre, is now back in the US because they realised, quote, this is one of the dumbest things I've ever done. Software engineer Jane Mitchell-Ark returned home to California after failing to win asylum in the Netherlands after discovering that life at the notorious Ter Apel refugee camp was far more terrifying than anything under Trump's America. There you go. This is the dumbest thing I've ever done. Wildly stupid, he claimed.
I think this fits into the F around and find out category.
Correct.
Oh, it's so bad in Trump's America.
There's a whole lot
so
of
bad
Hollywood
after.
stars that would identify with that feeling, who all said they would leave and decided America was better. That's it from us. Stick around. Coming up is the Rita Penhey Show. We'll see you tomorrow.